What's up guys, I'm back from Gamescom and welcome to the new video about Poison. Yes, Poison, you heard right. We are revisiting Poison today, and especially Poison with Barber. I've got a lot of requests to do that, and we had a poll on the Discord, on YouTube, and on my private Discord as well, where we tried to figure out, okay, what should I cover next? You guys have voted for a Poison revisit with Barber, and that is exactly what we're going to do today. So at first you might think, okay, Poison with Barber. Wasn't Poison not working correctly with Barber before? Yes, that was the case pre-patch 1.1.2, but now that they actually implemented a fix for Barber, and Poison also got changed a little bit with Bursting Venoms, this works now. Poison is actually really decent with Barber, and it's a really great build to just farm tier 100s. It's sort of a jack of all trades build, where you can also just farm Helltides with it. You can modify the build slightly to gain access to a great Lilith killer as well. And you can also make changes to the build, but these have to be of a little bit more substantial nature to use this in PvP. If you want to use Poison with Lilith, I do have the planner for Lilith linked below, and also the planner for Poison PvP linked below in the description as well. Do note though that for these two activities, some changes to the gear and the Paragon might be necessary. But now that Bursting Venoms is fixed, how do we actually play this build? Do we just spam Poison Imbuement whenever it's ready? No, don't do that. We save Poison Imbuement most of the time for big elite packs or big priority targets. And if we do that, then getting enough damage output is actually really possible. And even without Poison Imbuement, this build is tuned so that Barber with just unimbued Twisting Blades will kill anything on the screen as well in a single Barber rotation. And you don't have to worry about using Poison Imbuement on any trash mobs or anything that is not important enough to just press it. If you do get some procs from Bursting Venoms due to using Puncture the whole time, because we use Pestilent Points and that can actually proc Bursting Venoms, then just smash the button once, try to make use of the Bursting Venoms that you got, and then move on. It's sort of like pre-buffing yourself, or like dealing with the mobs that proc the pool. So that's pretty good tactic to use. You can also use Poison Imbuement just at the start of the dungeon to have it ready when you encounter the first elite pack, for example, and then be able to reapply it. And also, now with the change that we made, that we use Subverting Poison Trap, that it has a chance to reset our Imbuement skill cooldowns when activated. You always want to click Poison Imbuement first when you engage an elite, and then drop the Poison Trap to have a chance to reset your Imbuement immediately again. And also good news for those who don't like swaps. Yes, this build does not require any swaps. So these items I have here, which are used on swap, are not used in this build anymore. We were using these in Cold Dash Barber or Stealth Barber, but that's not necessary at all anymore in Poison, because Poison Imbuement deals with bosses very well. And as you can see in this clip right here, it is very, very easy to get enough damage on the boss once he's staggered. You will be just very insignificantly faster, slower than Cold Dash Barber or Stealth Barber builds, solely because of the reason that the poison damage is ticking high on the staggered boss. We use it in Frigid Finesse, and then the boss still takes enough damage to go down very, very quickly. We do not get these insane 140 million crits on the boss without item swaps, but for most tier 100 bosses that's absolutely not necessary, unless you want to save 2 or 3 seconds for when you're speedrunning, for example. I do personally still recommend to play Stealth Barber if you want to specifically speedrun, because that build is designed for that and for not much else. But if you just want a general good all-around build that can handle many different things and requires very little tweaking for different activities, then this Poison Barber build will be your build to go. It's a jack of all trades. It can do all of the things that you want to do, and there's very, very little maintenance in between the things required. Alright, for the gear. We have a helmet with maximum life, total armor, cooldown reduction, and ranks of poison imbuement. We use Frostbitten here on the helm. You could also use Quickening Fog on the helm and have Frostbitten on the gloves. It basically doesn't matter which way around you put them. If you're coming from Cold Barber, you potentially could use just Frostbitten on the gloves. because then you can imprint quickening fog on the helmet, where the roll is not as important as because we use the same gloves in this build than we use in Cold Barber. So if you're playing Cold Bash Barber 4 or Stealth Barber or any other variation and you want to try this, then I would recommend imprinting Frostbitten on the gloves and Quickening Fog on the helmet, due to how my aspects were beforehand and what I had in my stash. I had to do it this way, but in an ideal scenario, you would have Quickening Fog on the helmet and Frostbitten on the gloves. It's also like that in the planner, so follow the planner. Always follow the planner in my builds. The planner is always going to be most updated. What I'm saying in this video right now is basically relevant for the point of where I'm recording it. So I'll give you the best information that I have available to this day. But if anything changes in the build, then the planner is going to have this change first. And if you want to know why things changed, then I do recommend joining the Discord, link down below. I usually explain my choices and my changes I make to builds in my personal Discord. And they can also ask specific questions if you have any questions about the builds itself. Or all of my other builds are also linked in there, so make sure to check out the Discord. Anyway, we're using maximum life rubies in our gear because we usually do not get CC'd. If we get CC'd, we'll probably be dead anyway, so there's no point in trying to make up for a mistake that we can avoid. So maximum life is going to help us sustain ourselves a lot better, especially with siphoning strikes and also being able to sustain more hits. Right, you guys know these gloves. These gloves are the ones I have been using in my Cold Bash Barber video as well. Ranks of Twisting Blades, attack speed, lucky hit chance, crit strike chance. Same importance on these stats in this build in particular. I'm using Quickening Fog here on these. As I said earlier, you can also use Frostbitten on the gloves and move Quickening Fog to the helmet. On the pants, we are using the Implicit Barrier. This is really important to deal with damage over time effects that you encounter in many dungeons at this point. A lot of sigils will also have this as an affix, so the Max Life Barrier will be very helpful to counter that. We want total armor, we want distant damage reduction from enemies, we want close damage reduction, and we want flat damage reduction. Then we're using Might because we are using Puncture a lot, so that keeps up our damage reduction quite well. Essentially, these are the same stats that you want to use on the chest. The chest has the same stats, basically. These are the ones that you should prefer, and these stats do give you the most optimal defense in terms of efficiency of the stats itself. The chests, we use Umbrus. Then we're obviously using Penitent Greaves because we have Frostbitten. We need Penitent Greaves to chill the enemies, to then stun them with our cluster munitions grenades, and then they get frozen, so we can deal insane amounts of damage to them because they're Frostbitten. So yeah, you might ask yourself, okay, but why are we not using Noxious Eyes if we are playing Penitent Greaves? Well, the answer is quite simple. Noxious Eyes is only increasing the damage they take from poison, but we also deal a lot of physical damage because this is not a pure poison build as it has been in the past. This is a sort of hybridized build where we utilize physical damage from unimbued Twisting Blades as well as occasionally some poison damage on top to better deal with elites and bosses. So Noxious Eyes is definitely not something I would recommend over Frostbitten. Stick with Frostbitten, it's enough damage. This build has tons of damage built into it, and you don't need to go overboard on the damage and sacrifice something else for it. If you don't have Penitent Greaves, then this build does suffer a little. You would have to play Caltrops. I would recommend dropping Poison Trap for that, because with Caltrops, it's also a trap skill. You get all of the benefits from the passives. And Caltrops with the 3rd upgrade does actually chill. So you would lay out the Caltrops to chill the enemies, and then you can stun them with cluster munitions and they get frozen. That's a very efficient way to go about it if you don't have Penitent Greaves. And then you would use boots with movement speed, energy cost reduction, damage reduction while injured, and dodge chance to distant or regular dodge chance. In that case, you would also use the Ravager's aspect to get additional shadow steps. For the crossbow, we're using Accelerating. Accelerating is super strong still. We get a lot of value out of attack speed on this build. More procs, more hits, more cluster munitions, more everything. Even though this is a hybridized build, I'm still not sold on using Blade Dancer on the crossbow anymore. I think Accelerating wins out in most cases. And the calculations that have been done by me, by Ava, and by others have shown that in real-world scenarios and in most theorized scenarios as well, accelerating definitely wins out over twisting blades. So use accelerating on the crossbow. And for the stats, we use dexterity, alt stats to hit the Paragon breakpoints. This is very important here, so don't neglect alt stats. Critical strike damage and vulnerable damage. Alt stats is really important because you have a leniency of 9 alt stats of max total to be able to still get all of the Paragon breakpoints. So make sure your alt stats on the crossbow and the dagger combined are not more than 9 below maximum alt stats. If they are lower than that, you'll have to do some tweaks in the Paragon. On the starting board, you'll have to pick up this node and remove the damage or some other live node later down the line. Because hitting the breakpoints is very important, so do not neglect that, and make sure your stuff has enough alt stats on it. On the dagger, we are using a Pestilent Point dagger to proc more Pestilent Points with alt stats, critical strike damage, core skill damage, and vulnerable damage. We're forgoing the dexterity here for core skill damage. If you have a good roll on dexterity and a bad roll of core skill damage, use dexterity. If you have a good roll on core skill damage and a bad roll of dexterity, use core skill damage instead. So whichever is rolled higher, use that. The other stats, all stats, critical strike damage and vulnerable damage are very important. I do not have critical strike damage on this dagger here because I did not want to roll another dagger with critical strike damage, core skill damage, vulnerable, and all stats just for the sake of this video because I'm usually playing the stealth barber build. So please forgive me on that part, and this dagger still did absolutely well in tier 100, so don't worry too much about that. We're also using emeralds in our weapons here because we want to boost the physical part of twisting blades further, and we do not want to fully invest into poison because the hybridized approach here does a lot better in dungeons in general. And then we're also using Ashiara's Kanja. No poison build is complete without Ashiara's Kanja. We want high lucky hit chance on them, high item power, and obviously a high aspect. If you have a low rolled Ashiaras, but the aspect is still high, it might be worth it. You'd have to do some small calculation to see if it is really worth it. I have long thought about rings in this build, and I've come to the conclusion to forgo lucky hit chance entirely on the rings due to the fact that we only sparingly use poison imbuement, especially so when we are fighting elites. Usually bursting venoms is useful to have, but it's not mandatory. So I opted to forgo lucky hit chance on these in favor of better stats. Not using lucky hit chance on the rings opens us up to maximum life, which does help quite a bit with living and surviving things in general. So on this ring, which is the ring with cluster munitions, I imprint bursting venoms on. This is a vicious socket, so an orange one. Make sure you have an orange one here. I use critical strike chance, vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, and maximum life. You'll see that the other ring also does not have lucky hit chance, because on this ring I use resource generation. Why am I doing that? Because I think the optimal sweet spot for ideal resource management is 1 roll of energy cost reduction on the amulet and 1 roll of resource generation on the ring. With these two, you basically never run out of energy when you are fighting, and you'll sustain your energy quite well. You could make an argument for using consuming shadows because the Barber explodes in a shadow, but I don't see that being worth 2 points, 2 skill points. I'd rather use the skill points for something else, and having 2 rolls here that do benefit you in general quite well is definitely the way to go. So on this ring, we're using Brutal Heart. You can either use the Trickery Heart to pull in ranged mobs and to taunt up mobs. This helps with picking up prisoners, for example, or any other objectives that you have to do during the dungeon, because that is really important to group up ranged mobs. If you drop this and drop Poison Trap, or also Dash, because we use Quickening Fog, and that then drops the smoke grenade, which is also subterfuge skill and triggers the shadow decoy trap. And this is something you have to judge for yourself. The alternative to this is using the Revenge Heart. If you are not at the armor cap, or you're still a bit squishy in general, you're lacking the defense because your rolls are not that great or you just don't have the right rolls, then I definitely recommend using Revenge. I have, since I started speedrunning, basically never looked back to Revenge because I usually try to get out of the way of danger and not tank it. But if you just want a more relaxed farming experience, I definitely recommend using Revenge. And Trickery has more utility, but Revenge will give you just a little bit more of a relaxed farming experience in general. The rolls on these rings can be identical. You want to use critical strike damage, resource generation, vulnerable, and critical strike chance on the blue ring, and imprint Blade Dancer on here to get your Twisting Blades damage up. Amulets. This is the hardest piece in this build to properly evaluate and to properly recommend. I personally have opted for ranks of all imbuement, energy cost reduction, total armor. Total armor is insanely important here, so if you don't have an amulet with total armor, go get yourself one, because only with total armor will you be able to get to the armor cap of 9,850 unbuffed. This is really important to mitigate the damage that you take in tier 100 dungeons. And as a last roll here, I use Frigid Finesse. For poison specifically, Frigid Finesse is a little bit better than Weapons Mastery, because Frigid Finesse does actually benefit the poison damage, whereas Weapon Mastery would only benefit the Barber Explosion itself, but not the poison damage. So if you play a poison build like this one, then Frigid Finesse wins out on the Weapons Mastery. In Cold Dash Barber, they were basically similar in terms of damage output, but here Frigid Finesse definitely wins out. Then we use Disobedience on this necklace, because we want to get to the armor cap, and with a perfect roll Disobedience and an unbuffed armor of 9,850, we will definitely be getting to the armor cap of 13,200 something for tier 100 mobs. And in this socket, we're using a 2.5 second barber. I have a 2.8 second barber here, but ideally a 2.5 second barber would be the best. Anything between 2.2 and 2.9 seconds is fine for general use in the dungeon. The higher you go on the seconds, the easier time you will have on bosses though. Trash might not die as fast, but this is why for this poison build, I generally lean more towards 2.5 or even 2.6, 2.7, 2.8. But anything you have in that range is absolutely fine and will serve you very well. On the specialization, we're using combo points. Combo points have been a staple in quick builds all around. Combo points wins out over inner sight if you can handle the resource generation. You could make a case for playing preparation to reset your poison imbuement cooldown while using an ultimate skill, but we don't have space on our bar to do that, and it's very clunky, and it's not as useful as playing combo points and just making our poison imbuements hit harder than having them ready more often. Alright, for the skill tree, we have Puncture with the usual suspects of Enhanced Puncture and Fundamental Puncture to apply Vulnerable. We max out Twisting Blades and we take Daze to CC on crowd control enemies in general. Then we have 3 points in Sturdy, fairly standard nowadays because we need to mitigate any damage that comes in. 3 points in Siphoning Strikes, that heals us quite much at this point because we have a lot of maximum life. Very useful in general to keep us topped up. Then we use Shadow Step with enhanced and methodical Shadow Step upgrades to stun the enemies that we're engaging. We use Weapons Mastery here because we get the bonus for each dagger individually, and that means it's 15 plus 15% multiplicative increase to our damage against healthy enemies. This is very potent. This applies to the damage that we deal with unimbued Twisting Blades, or with like just the base damage from not imbued Twisting Blades. Even if we imbue our Twisting Blades though, we still get this benefit, but then the damage only applies to the physical part of the damage and not the poison part of the damage. Nevertheless, this is still very strong, very beneficial to the build, so pick up 3 points here if you can. Then we have Dash, and we pick up Enhanced Dash to increase our critical strike damage against enemies. Again, critical strike damage works in this build because we want to boost the physical part of Twisting Blades. In the past, we have known that critical strike damage does not work with poison. That is still true, but we still want to increase the damage that our non-poison part of the damage deals, and that's why Enhanced Dash is really good. And also Methodical Dash to reduce the cooldown, because whenever we throw a nade with Quickening Fog, we then hit the enemies with Dash, and our cooldown from Dash is immediately reduced. 1 point in Rapid Gambits for faster evades, and 1 point for Trick Attacks to knock down enemies whenever we daze them. And we do that quite often because we use improved Twisting Blades. And also the Smoke Grenade that we throw with Quickening Fog, that's why we put points in here, does actually daze the enemies, and then they also take 20% increased multiplicative damage when they're hit by it. So the general use here is to dash into a group of enemies, especially ranged mobs, and then go to town with them with your Twisting Blades, and potentially drop a trap onto them and use Poison Imbuement if it's an elite pack. So yeah. And then we use Dark Shroud because we use Umbrus. We want the movement speed and the chance to not be consumed. Then we have Poison Trap. Poison Trap is really strong in this build. We use it to gain access to Trap Mastery, which increases our critical strike chance. We use it to gain access to Deadly Ambush to increase our critical strike damage. And we use it to knock the enemies down, crowd control them. Use it to proc the decoy if we're playing that. And then we also use it to have a chance to potentially reset our imbuement skill cooldowns whenever we activate it. So the all-around package for Poison Trap is super strong. And it also like poisons enemies, so we get a lot of stacks from Disobedience from it. So it's a super good all-around jack-of-all-trades tool that surely can't be missing in any poison build. Because it also gives us access to Deadly Venom and Debilitating Toxins to further increase our damage and our defense. Then we use only a single point in Poison Imbuement. That is absolutely enough, because Poison Imbuement still deals insane amounts of damage for all the boosts that we do to it. And 1 single point is enough to just pick up the upgrades. We use our remaining points elsewhere to gain more benefits from that. So we then use Enhanced Poison Imbuement to increase the duration, and Blended Poison Imbuement. So whenever we critically strike, and we have a lot of critical strike chance in this build, we will deal increased poisoning damage. Do note here that this does not mean that this is increased by your critical strike damage. This is basically only a trigger. So if you hit a critical strike with a Poison Imbued skill, it will deal more damage. That's all that it says. Critical strike damage still only benefits the unimbued part of a Poison Imbued Twisting Blades. So just the physical part. So don't get these two things mixed up. It's a little bit confusing, I can understand that, but in general, don't get that mixed up. Blend Poison Imbuement is very good. It just doesn't benefit from critical strike damage. Right, then we have points in Frigid Finesse. Oh my, is Frigid Finesse strong. 30% multiplicative increase to chilled enemies, and then 60% against frozen enemies. That's absolutely massive, and I personally recommend you to have 3 points in here, and also 3 points from the amulet. Frigid Finesse is definitely the strongest damage passive for any hybrid or poison-based build, so definitely pick up the maximum points available here. Then we have 1 point in Alchemist Fortune to increase our lucky hit chance. And then we have 3 points in Innovation to gain back energy. Very important, we attack quite fast. We have a bit of lucky hit chance from Ashiara's Kanja. So this basically pays for itself with Alchemist Fortune. Really strong, keeps us topped up in energy if we need it. And in general, a good all-round passive to pick up. 3 points in Trap Mastery. As I said earlier, we play Poison Trap, so this is natural. Increases our critical strike chance. Very strong, very good. Trap Mastery also has the added benefit that it actually increases the damage, increases the chance to freeze enemies with Frostbitten, because Frostbitten has twice our critical strike chance to freeze enemies whenever they're affected by grenades. So with Poison Trap and Trap Mastery, we push ourselves over 50% critical strike chance, given decent gear. And decent rolls on critical strike chance on that gear. And that then means that any grenade that we drop onto enemies has a higher than 100%, so it always does that, chance to freeze them. So Trap Mastery is very potent and very important here. Then we use 1 point in Adrenaline Rush and 3 points into Haste to better deal with our energy economy, get movement speed, get attack speed. Good thing, pick that up. And then we have Close Quarters Combat again. Yes, this build uses Close Quarters Combat. Close Quarters Combat is the best key passive for a rogue to use, unless you're still leveling or having trouble surviving. Then definitely pick up Momentum, but Close Quarters Combat gives you so many benefits. It is definitely the strongest choice here. We use that in this build, and I do recommend each and everyone to try out Close Quarters Combat. It's amazing. Let's go with the Paragon board. For our Paragon board, we started out with Devious in the starting board. You might ask yourself, okay, why don't we use versatility here, that we use poison imbuement? Well, poison imbuement in this build is not the main source of our damage. At least not against most of the time in the dungeon. And Devious is good because it also increases our damage from poison imbuement, but also from unimbued twisting blades. So taking 10% multiplicative damage in most cases, or in all cases, is better than picking up 15% for just poison imbuement. That's why I'm using Devious here. I have not felt the need to switch this to versatility during the dungeons. I think the damage was absolutely fine. Even against bosses, it was still very, very fine. So I think Devious here is a safer choice because it helps you with the overall clear of the dungeon than versatility itself. You can also use versatility if you have that leveled and you don't have Devious leveled yet, but I recommend switching it to Devious later down the line as well. We pick up all the boosted nodes from all damage and armor. That is quite important to reach breakpoints and to increase our damage with poison imbuement and our regular damage, because flat damage still is applied twice to the poisoning damage of poison imbuement, so definitely recommend you to have that available to you. And we pick up this resilience node here for the maximum life and the resistance. Yes, resistance is not great in this game, but even a little bit of resistance can still help out with our overall defense, and picking this maximum life node with the strength point here is still more efficient than picking maximum life somewhere else. Then we move on to Cutting Stratagem. In our pure poison build, we would be moving this way and picking up this node. I opted not to do that here because we need the points elsewhere, and we still deal enough damage without that. We come in from this side, pick up Finisher, slot in Diminish to boost up the core skill damage and the armor from Lawless, and then pick up all the armor nodes. If you're still leveling, put Exploit in here, and then once you unlock the last board where Exploit is in, you can definitely swap Diminish back in there. On Cheap Shot, we put in Combat. Yes, we use Combat in the Poison build. That's crazy, isn't it? But Combat is actually really good here. It helps with our action, with our energy economy, and it also increases our critical strike damage. As I said, critical strike damage in this build is quite good because it boosts our Barber damage and all of the damage that we do while not imbued with poison imbuement. So Combat is a stronger choice here. We pick up this node for armor and healthy damage, and then we move up to the top to reduce damage from elites, pick up more armor, and then we move into the legendary node because each time we crowd control, for each different crowd controlled enemy that is nearby, we gain increased damage. Very strong. We do crowd control quite a lot. If you dash into a pack, you have this already maxed. So really strong choice. Very easy to pick up, so definitely get that. Then we move to the top into Exploit Weakness. On Exploit Weakness, we do Socket and Control. Controls are very strong because we chill and freeze enemies all the time, and we have crowd controlled enemies around us all the time as well. So we want to increase the damage to these targets as much as we can. We pick up Artifice here for the vulnerable damage. Move on first to the No Witnesses board. Pick up this damage to healthy critical strike damage. Then move into the socket, where we socket in efficacy. My oh my, have I been waiting to use efficacy on this board again. It is really strong. I cannot say how good and how strong this is. Boosting up the maximum life here by efficacy and the all damage. This is just a match made in heaven for poison in general. So yes, while poison is still not the biggest part of our damage as in a pure poison build, it's still a good part of our damage, so boosting that up with the imbuement skill potency and boosting the all damage is very beneficial, so use efficacy here. Then we go back to Exploit Weaknesses. This time we branch out to the right. Pick up Exploit here, and then pick up Unassailable, pick up the Armor Node 2, and move to the right into Tricks of the Trade. On Tricks of the Trade, we do socket in closer, pick up the focus damage for elites, and also pick up the armor node for lawless. Now note, you do need 610 strength to get this node. So if you don't have the recommended all stats, try to use items that have enough all stats to get this breakpoint, because this is really important. Because you need to hit the armor breakpoint for tier 100. And on No Witnesses, you need 550 intelligence to pick this up. I swapped a few nodes around, which is why I'm only 1 point over. But in general, you can be 9 points off the maximum all stats to still get access to this node. These nodes only require 530, and 530 ranks is also something that you will easily have if you already have 610 for this. Then we move down from Tricks of the Trade into Deadly Ambush. Yes, we use Deadly Ambush because we play Poison Trap. We use Spring Loaded to reduce the spring time of a trap. This is really important because if our trap gets activated faster, the stun comes out faster, the stacks from Disobedient will come on faster, you get the critical strike chance faster. Everything will be better if you play Poison Trap. And if you choose to play Poison Trap, do play Spring Loaded because it's the best thing you can do to make your trap more useful. Then we move in here to gain the damage reduction from trapped enemies, and then we pick up Exploit in this to gain access to more vulnerable application and more vulnerable damage itself. And then we spend the last points that we have to go into Deadly Ambush. Okay, now you might ask yourself, okay, why are we picking up Deadly Ambush? Why don't we pick up Tricks of the Trade here? Tricks of the Trade is 50 to 25% more damage, you know? Yes, technically that's true, but Deadly Ambush is a multiplicative increase to our critical strike damage, and that makes our Barber explosions really go big. And that will definitely help us to have an easier time slaying the boss even without swaps. Poison Trap the boss when he's staggered, and you will see him being deleted basically in either 1 or even 2 explosions, depending on how well you did the stagger and how well all the things play out. Deadly Ambush is very, very strong here. It helps with the leads, it helps with everything. And do remember, Tricks of the Trade is still not buffing the poison damage for poison imbuement. And if you want to use Tricks of the Trade to deal with the leads, then it's better to use Deadly Ambush in that case. So, overall, in general, we gain more benefit in this particular build from Deadly Ambush than we do from Tricks of the Trade. And it's not worth to pick up anything else, like to drop anything else for Tricks of the Trade. I think Deadly Ambush here is definitely the best option for this build in particular. Do not forget to join my private Discord. The link for that is definitely below in the description. And I also regularly post now on Instagram and on Twitter, so make sure to follow me on there as well. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy the Poison revisit with Barber. I personally had much fun recording this and going back to Poison to have just a dungeon where I actually speed farm it instead of going through it as quickly as I can while speedrunning. I think the build is very solid. I think this is definitely a good jack of all trades build to have if you want to branch out to multiple activities and you don't want to specifically speedrun. Then I'd heavily recommend playing this build. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's very versatile. And yeah. Glad you enjoyed it, and go watch my other videos as well. I do have a PvP video coming next week, so stay tuned for that as well. So far, thank you, and bye-bye.